Hey, just a quick note to let you know that this video is a pre-recorded live event. If you'd like to join our upcoming events, such as demos and office hours, you can check out our schedule on our support page. Hope you find this video helpful and look forward to seeing you in our next event. Welcome everyone. Thanks for those that can join this demo today live, and hello to all of you watching this video later. So in today's demo, what I'm going to be going through is how to calculate some metrics in Microsoft Power BI with your ZooMonitor data. So I certainly know in working with a lot of people that, there's a lot of ZooMonitor users out there that are collecting a lot of data and really getting into that challenge now of what do we do with all that data that we have? And one of the tools that I've certainly found useful for me at Lincoln Park is the Microsoft Power BI software. And so if you're not familiar with Microsoft Power BI, it's basically a tool made by Microsoft to be able to create dashboard displays of your data. There's you'll see as I go through this demo, easy to use interface there, pretty user friendly. You can download the desktop version for free, so it's a pretty accessible tool, I think, for a lot of people out there looking for other ways to maybe get insights out of their data quickly. I wasn't planning today to go through too much background on the Power BI software, but I do have other videos posted up to the YouTube channel that go through a little bit more background on what Microsoft Power BI is. So I certainly recommend maybe starting with those videos and then leading into this video. And so today what I'm going to be focusing on is how to calculate some metrics that we really want out of our behavior data. So the two metrics I'm going to work on today are percent of time, and that's for our interval data. And so when we record data through interval sampling, we record at predetermined time points, and then generally the way we want to calculate that is as a percent of time, or percent of scans, some people might say. And then the other one is a rate. And that's for our all occurrence data. And so all occurrence data, which is you're sampling anytime the behavior occurs, you're making a note of that it occurred. The metric typically used there is a rate, which is generally occurrences per minute, or whatever time unit you want, occurrences per hour. Today I'm going to go through occurrences per minute as the rate. So those two metrics are pretty much the primary ones that you would use with your interval and all occurrence data. And they're pretty easy to calculate in Power BI. And so I'm going to walk through a quick demo of how to do that here. Okay, so here we have Power BI. So this is just, I opened the program here. I don't have any data loaded in at this point. So we'll go ahead and kind of work through all of this together. So the first thing you'll want to do, obviously, is you're going to need to import your data. So I'm going to click this import data from Excel, and I'm going to open up some data from our Lion project. And so this is a project we have here at Lincoln Park Zoo for our African lions. And we conduct 10-minute observations on our lions, and we record data at 1-minute intervals. And so that's just a little bit of background on the sampling that you'll see here in the Excel file. And you could have loaded that data and then click transform, or you can directly go into that transform data step. In Power BI, when you click transform data there, or if you clicked it through that original menu, it's opening what's called Power Query Editor. And so Power Query in Microsoft Power BI, basically this is the engine that does a lot of the shaping of the data. And so there's really two ways we could calculate some of these metrics I talked about, that percent of time and that rate. You could calculate it through something called DAX. So DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions. That is basically a language that's running in the front end here. I'll just close this and show. So anything that you're running on this screen here, that would actually be using a coding language called DAX. So if you wanted to calculate any sort of metrics or anything like that, you would need to be coding those formulas in DAX. If you are good at coding and you're familiar with DAX, that language, and how to get what you want out of it, certainly I think that is a very fine approach. You can go that direction. I certainly know from my experience in trying to do some of this in DAX, and coming from more of an Excel background, I don't have a strong coding background, and I certainly know a lot of our users don't as well. And I have found it much more useful to kind of do the same sort of things in Power Query instead of DAX. And the nice thing here about Power Query is, as you can see, you're actually looking at your data every step that you apply to it. And so it's really nice that you can be able to see sort of all the steps that you're doing and kind of see how it's changing your data. Because if you need to troubleshoot anything, you can always kind of go up your steps there and be able to do that. So right now, we're in Power Query Editor here. So this is normally a pop-up window. I just have it expanded to the full screen here. So on the left here, you can see these are the queries. This is the sheet 1. So this is from our Excel file. And I should mention too that the data export from our Lion project is strictly straight out of ZooMonitor. I haven't changed anything that's coming out of ZooMonitor there. So that's basically what you're seeing here. If you're familiar with our ZooMonitor export, you probably recognize a lot of these columns right here. And then the other area that we're going to be looking at too a lot is over here. So this is where each of those steps. So as I mentioned, Power Query works off of applying multiple steps to each query. These are the steps over here that I'm referencing. And so you can see as we imported the data, it actually automatically applies a few steps here. So you can see we have a source here, which was that file pathway for that Excel file, and then navigating to the sheet in that Excel file, that sheet 1 that we opened. And then it automatically promotes the first row as headers that it finds. And then it automatically looks to detect the data type for each column. So you can see this 1, 2, 3 means it's a numeric. This ABC means it's a text. And so you can see it's automatically looking to make sure this would be a date. So it's automatically looking at each column to figure out what the correct type of data is in the column. So let's calculate percent of time for our first interval channel in this project, our behavior channel. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly just rename this. And generally I rename all of my my queries with the data that comes in just as raw data there. And so what I'm then going to do is I'm going to reference this query. So there's two options here. You can duplicate it and reference it. So let me just do both of those just so you can see them. If I duplicate it, you see it's literally a full duplicate and it has all of the steps. I generally don't want to do that because you're having to also performance-wise redo all of these steps. Whereas, you know, if you renamed your sheet in your Excel file, you would have to fix that in this query. You know, you'd have to go and fix the navigation step here and then fix it in this step as well. So it's a little bit more tedious to do it that way. Generally, if I'm working off of the end product of a query, which is what I would be doing here, working off of like what comes out after this step, what you're seeing here on the screen, I would go to reference. So let me go ahead and delete that duplicate one. And you see with when we referenced it, the difference is the source now is basically the end of what this query is. So whatever this query is showing at the last step, that's now the source step for basically this query here, which is what we wanted. So let me go up here, and I'm just going to call this behavior percent. Get that started. Okay, so the first step here, if you are familiar with ZooMonitor, there's lots of columns here. So I'm going to scroll over, and what I'm looking for is the channel type column right here. Let me get it a little bit more in the middle of my screen. So this channel type column here. So the first thing I'm going to do just for performance reasons is I'm going to filter out all the data, and I'm going to only select the interval channel. So now when the next steps that I do, Power BI is working off a lot less rows there. So just helping optimize it a little bit there. And then the next piece is also optimizing it. You can see we've got a lot of columns here in the ZooMonitor export, much to many people's chagrin there. And so what we're going to do is only use the columns that we need here. So we're going to go up to choose columns. And then you can see all the columns listed here. So we're going to deselect all of them, click session ID. We need focal name. And we're going to use this interval channel 1 value. So this is still, like I said, this is the behavior percent, and we're using the interval data here. If you were doing a different channel, if I wanted to do this for interval channel 2 or 3, I could easily just click those at this step here, and it just picks whatever channel I want. So if I click those 3, you'll see this is what we've got here. So we've got our session ID, which is basically a unique identifier for each session in ZooMonitor. Focal name, which is obviously the name for this project of our lions. So we have Hasira and Cleo, 2 of our females, and then all of our behaviors in here. So the first step that I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here, and you'll see if you have any blanks, so where an observer didn't record a behavior, you'll see a null up here. And so I generally filter those out. What that does mean is that your percent of time is the percent of recorded intervals. So if you have a 10-minute session, like we have 10-minute sessions, we record 1 interval per minute. So we would have 10 intervals total. If our observer missed one of those intervals, and I'm filtering it out, that percentage is now out of 9 intervals, not out of the full 10. So something to be aware of. Generally, there should only be 1 or maybe a couple intervals missed on average. So it shouldn't be something that's happening characteristically. If you're using, like if an animal goes out of view and you're skipping the interval to record that, that's definitely not the best practice for that. So you would always want to have like other and animal not visible to make sure that your ethogram, what you're recording in this channel, you always can record something that the animal is doing there. So you should never ideally want to have blanks there, but blanks do happen for sure. So I'm going to filter that out there, and then I am going to group rows. So the first thing that we want to do, so just to kind of set the stage here, as you can see, these are the intervals here. And you'll notice I also didn't bring in the column for the interval number because we don't really need it. Each row here is a separate interval. And you can see we have the numbers, or we have the amount here that is really what we care about. So the first thing we really want to get here is how many intervals occurred on the session. So like I said, we have 10-minute sessions, 1-minute intervals, should be 10 for all of us for all of these sessions. But you'll see certainly in some sessions, it's not the case where those sessions might have had like an interval missed or so. So to group, we're going to group these 2 columns here. So let's select, I hold shift and then click these 2 columns. I go to group by, and you'll see I have those 2 columns up there. And then this first one, I'm going to rename this total scans, and then I'm going to have it count rows. So basically what it's doing here is it's going to count the rows here, and the number of rows is obviously our number of scans. So that's perfect. It's going to give us that total. But I still obviously, I don't want just that. I still want to be able to have this behavior data. So the next one, I'm just going to call this column. You can call it whatever you want. But you want to set up an additional step here for all rows. And also in the group by 2, this is under the advanced step here. So if you open it and you didn't use advanced previously, it might open to basic. So just check advanced and you'll get these additional options here as well. And so we have column, all rows. I'll go ahead and click OK. So you can see the total scans now. I have the total number of scans per session. So each row now is 1 session for each individual. So this one is for Hasira. This one is Cleo. You can see we had 10 scans for most of our sessions here. Some sessions we had a few less scans here, but mostly 10 or 9 for almost all the ones that you're seeing here, which is good. So really quick, we're going to expand this column. So basically in this column, what you're seeing here, this table, this is essentially a table of all the data that was in the previous one in every cell. That's kind of confusing, so let me just kind of show what that looks like here. So if you click that little icon up there, you can basically expand it. These were all the columns that previously existed, so these are all of the columns that live in every single table right here. Really, we just want this interval channel 1 value here. So I'm going to deselect the rest, click this one, and then I'm going to uncheck this use original column name as prefix because we don't need that there. Okay, so now we've got our, we're back to, we still have our total scans here, but now we have the behavior that occurred for each scan as well. So these are the 10 scans for Hasira, and you can see that we had a number with sitting, lying, standing, a couple play, more standing, and then some general exploratory here. So you can see each of the 10 scans are shown here, which is exactly what we want here. So the next step is going to be, we're going to duplicate this column. And so if you click this column, you can go up to add column and you can go to duplicate. I'm guessing you can probably right click. Yep. You can also right click the top here and you can go to duplicate. you'll see that there's a lot of overlap between obviously what you can do up here and what you have in this quick menu here when you right click as well. So go to duplicate there. All right, so now basically we have a complete copy of this column. And you're probably wondering, why am I copying this column here? And the reason is because the thing that we need now is we need to know how many times did sitting lying occur for this session. You know, we don't want a column. Right now, this is in what's known as a long format for the data, right? We don't want to necessarily know how many times, one row for each of these. We want to know, you know, how many times did it occur in one cell here. And so the way to do that is we're going to pivot the data into a wide format. And so you'll see when it goes from this long format to wide format, it's going to give us exactly what we need here. So I'm going to select those two columns, and I'm going to go to pivot column here in the transform menu. And you will see it says we're going to use interval channel 1 to create the columns. And then inside the columns, we're going to use interval channel 1 value copy. And so this is why we did that copy step, because if I only had this one column here, I wouldn't have another column that I could select to count for the values here. So that's why we do the copy step, that duplicate in the previous step. And so this here, you can see these numbers are basically from that copy duplicate column there, where it's counting the number of times sitting lying happened, the number of times standing happened, and so forth. And so now we have a column for every behavior, and we have now our totals for each behavior for each session, which is great. We're definitely getting closer. But now our data is in a wide format, which is not the most workable. If you're trying to plot this or do any sort of analysis, you see we have a separate column for every behavior listed here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that first column, hold Shift, and then click all the columns. Scroll back, and then I'm going to go up here and go to unpivot. And so those two steps are really the magic of how to easily analyze this data. This is pivot, unpivot step. And when you do that pivot, unpivot, what you'll see here, which is really critical, is that we have zeros. And that's certainly the thing. If you try to analyze this data and aren't doing it this way, be very careful that you're not missing the zeros that you would need here. Because obviously, if you want to calculate an average, you need to have these zeros as part of your average as well, not just an average of, you know, when the behavior occurred, what was the average. So certainly that's a really important reason that we do that pivot, unpivot there. And so you can see pretty much we've got what we need to calculate our percent now. So we have our percent is our number of intervals that the behavior occurred divided by the total number of intervals. We have here the number of intervals that the behavior occurred, and here's our total number of intervals. So we've got everything that we need here. I'm just going to quickly rename these columns just to make them a little bit more useful for me to follow. So I renamed that behavior and behavior scans, and now we're going to go up to add column and go to custom column here. We're going to call this behavior percent, and we are going to add our behavior scans divided by our total number of scans, and then we're going to wrap this in parentheses and multiply by 100. So now we've got our behavior percent. We're pretty much golden. The only last piece here, very quickly, is that you're going to want to change the type here. So right now you can see it's not detecting what type it is. That's why you see ABC123 up here next to it. So we're going to want to tell it that this is a numeric column here. So you can have the column selected, right click, go to change type, and then you can tell it decimal number there, and you'll see it's the correct type now. You can also, like I said, go up to transform and do that same data type step up here in transform as well. So right there, we're good. We've got our behavior percent. I'm going to redo some of that to calculate our rate as our next one. The one thing I did want to mention is this is the percent of time, not percent of visible time. If you wanted to calculate percent of visible time, it's super easy to do. All you would do is on this step right here, where you filtered the rows, we filtered out the null here. All you would do is basically choose your not visible behaviors and also filter those out. So for us, our two not visible behaviors, we have a behavior obscured and an animal not visible. This is when we can't tell what the behavior is, but we can see the animal. This is we cannot see the animal. So we record that with a little bit of nuance there, but both of those we could filter out. And then by doing that, all of a sudden we would get our percent of visible time. So super easy to calculate that. So let's go ahead and calculate our rate here. So, okay, I'm going to need to call a little bit of a do-over on this demo here. So as I was calculating the all occurrence rate during this demo, afterwards, the great Jennifer Hamilton of Detroit Zoo pointed out that I actually had an error. So I'm going to recalculate it here, and then you'll see the correct way to do it, and I'll point out actually where I went wrong, and you can kind of see how easy it is to fix. Okay, so we have our Power BI report here. We have our behavior percent calculated. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate our raw data query here again. And so you can see up here this all occurrence rate. That's the one I calculated originally during the live demo, but we're not going to be using that. I'm going to be redoing this, and you'll kind of see what happened there. So we have this raw data. Let me rename this all occurrence rate correct this time. Okay, so we have all of our columns in here. So as our first step, previously with our first step, what we did here when we were looking at the behavior percent is we filtered rows, that first step there. However, we're not going to do that this time. And that is exactly where I went wrong previously in the demo. So I filtered out the rows for just the all occurrence, just when all occurrence behaviors occurred. So I went over here to channel type and I filtered for all occurrence. The problem with that is if you didn't have an all occurrence behavior recorded on a given session, you'll be filtering out those sessions. So previously when I did the demo, the all occurrence rates were correct. However, I was missing zeros for all of the sessions that had no all occurrence behavior recorded at all because I just filtered it out here. So we don't want to do that in this case. For interval behavior, it totally makes sense because in every session you would have interval behavior recorded, but all occurrence behaviors, you only record them if they occur. So instead of doing that, we're not going to do that step here. We're not going to filter those rows. We are still going to remove columns. So let's go up to remove columns. Let me do this correctly. We're going to go up to choose columns and click session ID, focal name, and all occurrence one value. So just like before with the interval percent, we have these three columns here. Instead of the interval channel 1 value, now we have all occurrence value. So the next step to kind of follow along with what we did before with the behavior percent, to do those same steps, we would normally duplicate it, and then we would pivot it and then unpivot it. However, because we have these nulls here, so this is a session right here, 182544, this session ID right here, we had no all occurrence values recorded here. So that's why you see nulls for each row listed here. So if we were to try to do those same steps that we did before where we pivot and then unpivot, we're going to run into an error because this here is not going to be recognized as text like these values would be. So it's not going to work when you try to pivot and unpivot. So it's really easy what we're going to do to fix that. So we're just going to right click and we are going to go to replace values. And so the value we want to look for is null. And just we are going to replace that with the words no behavior. So a pretty simple fix there. Now we have a placeholder for all of the sessions that had no behavior recorded. They still have a placeholder here when we go to analyze our data here. So let's go ahead and duplicate it. So I just right clicked and did duplicate column. We're going to select those two columns like we did before. We are going to pivot. And so it's going to pivot that column and then use the duplicate for the values, which is what we want. And this is exactly what we're looking for right here. So now we have this column here that has no behavior. And you can see for these sessions that, this session here, there was no all occurrence behaviors recorded. It's 0 for every behavior listed there. And we have 10 cases of no behavior. That 10 refers to basically the intervals because we didn't filter out that data. So that's all it's saying there, but that's what we want is that placeholder there. Because really what we want is we want these zeros. So like this second session here, the fact that there was 2 here, 2 social playing, 2 social grooming, and 10 here, these 10 for this session is completely irrelevant. We don't really care about that. But this session up here would have been dropped if we didn't add this no behavior, replace that null value with the no behavior, and then keep it here as a placeholder. So this session still gets to be combined with the full data. So we're going to click no behavior. We're going to hold shift and click contact aggression, and then we're going to go up and click unpivot. So now we've got our unpivot like we had before. And like I said, we really don't need that no behavior because really that's only telling us that was really just a placeholder. So like this session right here that we were talking about, you can see now we have zeros for all of our all occurrence behaviors, which is exactly what we want. And we have 10 times no behavior, which we really don't need. So at this step, we can actually go ahead and we can filter out that behavior. So we have our no behavior right here, and we'll go ahead and filter that out. There's another behavior that we also include in how we record data at Lincoln Park Zoo. We usually add this behavior, general comment, which is basically just an all occurrence behavior that our volunteers use to make a note to us, which I don't really care about the rate for how many times our volunteers make notes. So I'm going to also uncheck this behavior there as well. And so now we just have all of the all occurrence behaviors that the animals are doing here left, and then the value over here. And so let's go ahead and rename these columns. So we have behavior, and I'll call this occurrences. And then all we need to do now is calculate our rate. And so in this demo here, what I'm going to be doing is just calculating a rate using the placeholder of 10 minutes. Since all of our sessions were 10 minutes, I'm going to divide these values by 10 and use that as kind of our total session duration. However, if sessions did end early, it would be slightly inaccurate. They're not going to be exactly 10 minutes then. And if you did want to accommodate that, if you wanted to make sure that, if you had sessions that were ending early often, what you can do is you can go up into your raw data, your original raw data, and you can calculate another column here to take your duration, looking at your session start time from your session end time. And so if you look at that duration column, you'll have a total amount of time that the session lasted. Should be 10 minutes for us if the session went to full length, but some sessions might have ended early, which that would capture. And then in your query here, what you'll need to do is you'll need to merge that in and basically bring that piece in. And I'm not going to go through those steps here, but you would go in up here to merge queries, and that's where you would merge a column from the raw data with that duration into this query here, matching it on your session ID here. We're not going to do that. Like I said, here we're just going to calculate it, assuming that each session went to 10 minutes. So we're going to go up to add column, add custom column here. And then we are going to rename this all occurrence rate, occurrences per minute. I think I'll just call it rate. Maybe clean that up so it's a little bit shorter. And then pretty simple formula here. It's just going to be our number of occurrences divided by 10 for our 10 minutes there. So now you can see we have our rate here. So we're pretty much done. Just like before though, it's still not recognizing this the data type for this column. You can see the ABC 123 up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the type for the column, right click and go to change type, and then click decimal number there. And so you can see now it has it recognized as a numeric value there. So just remember, when you do all occurrence, when you are looking at the rate for all occurrence values, don't make the mistake that I made. Make sure that you do keep that placeholder for all of those sessions that had no behavior recorded following those steps I just outlined. And just really quick, I'm just going to show how easy it is to then, now that we have that data, we can quickly run a plot. So I hit close and apply, and basically what it does is it takes all those steps that we had in Power Query, it applies all of those, and now you can see over here we have those three queries that we had, our raw data, behavior percent, and all occurrence rate there. So let's just throw together a really quick activity budget of our behavior percent. So if we pull down our behavior percent here, our behavior here, and our focal name here, you can see we've got something looking like a activity budget. Not quite, because, we've got 4,000 up here on the y-axis. So it's right now doing a sum by default. You would just click this little drop down and go to average. And now we actually have our activity budget here. It's filtering or sorting it by the behaviors that occurred the most. If you want to change that sort, you can go up here and you can change the sort axis here to also go alphabetical if you wanted. That's reverse alphabetical. And then you can sort ascending or descending. So if you wanted to go alphabetical, you could do something like that. So very easy once you've got your data shaped and you've got those percentages calculated and those rates calculated to then analyze your data. So I hope that demo was helpful. You can always feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and I hope to see you in the next one. All right, take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked that video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to be notified when we release more videos. If you have any questions about ZooMonitor, you can always feel free to contact us at ZooMonitor@lpzoo.org. Thanks.